So there's this new show that my wife and I are watching on Apple TV called Your Friends and Neighbors. And breaking it down simply, this guy has a fantastic job, makes great money, gets let go, finds out he's not as wealthy as he thought he was. As he goes through the show, he's talking about what it's like to make this amount of money. It reminds me of a lot of the people that we meet with. They're in their mid 40s, maybe early 50s. They're making $500,000 a year, amazing house, awesome vehicles, kids are going to private school, the whole thing. But they sit down and they tell us they don't feel wealthy.
Yeah, it's wild because when you hear that somebody making 400,000, 500,000 a year, that's the dream, flexibility, freedom. It feels like that place that everybody aspires to, and not many are able to actually get there.
I think at all stages in life, we're thinking if I can just make this much more, maybe if I can make 100,000, then it's if I can make 200, if I can make 300, 400, it just keeps going up. The problem is the money's always spoken for. You've got a bigger mortgage, you've got kids' activities, your vacations are nicer, right? Like we talked about last time, maybe you're helping your parents out, your lifestyle's getting bigger. A lot of the people that we talk to say, if I don't keep earning at this level, or if my bonus doesn't come in, right, this whole thing unravels. And that's not wealth. That's just high pressure. It's a high lifestyle. It's being able to do a lot of things that a lot of people can't do, but that's not real wealth.
Yeah, I take that level of income any day, but the point still stands, right? Just because you've got that much more income doesn't mean that you're suddenly on the fast track to complete financial freedom.
Those conversations really stick with me, man. We have them all the time. And we talk to so many people, they're in their 40s, their 50s, they're in their peak earning years, they're doing all the right things, they've got great income. A lot of them even have pretty sizable retirement and investment accounts. They're checking all of those boxes, but they come to us because they're still feeling like a step behind. They're still feeling just really uncertain about what their current financial picture really is.
That's why when you brought up this topic, I was excited because it really digs into, we all think of wealth, right? And I think a lot of people, it's just this term that we hear and we think, oh yeah, that's just complete financial security, making a bunch of money. And the reality is a lot of people don't really think about what is wealth, right? What does that mean? Not just wealth on paper, the numbers on your bank account, but the things that actually matter and play into what wealth really is.
Yeah. So if you ever looked around and thought, man, I'm making more money than I ever thought I would, but I still don't feel like I've made it yet, then this episode is definitely for you. My name's Sam Rodriguez. I'm a certified financial planner. This is Money and Stuff. Before we get started, I want to say thank you so much for tuning in. If you could hit that like or subscribe, it would mean the world to me. We'll try to make content that we think you'll like, that you'll enjoy listening to, and I promise that we'll just continue to try to do that. I'd be so thankful if you would hit that like or subscribe. Thanks a lot, guys. So I really love this topic. I think a lot of people assume that someone that's making more money than they are, whatever level that is, right? If you're making 50,000 a year, you think someone making 100. You're making 100, you think someone making 150. Whatever it is, you think, man, they've got it made. Their life must be so easy. They probably have no financial stress. And the thing that was really interesting to me in this show, and I'm not giving anything away here, if you haven't seen it yet, there's only 2 episodes out, and I'm only talking about the stuff that happened in episode 1. But this guy talks about the progression of his career and how he was in school, got his first job, got an apartment. He couldn't afford the apartment, but it was close to work. He started making enough money that he should have been okay. But the issue was, like, what he kept saying was like, what he said at the beginning was like, I got my job, but I got this apartment, so I was broke because he couldn't afford the apartment. He's doing good at my job. I make whatever it is, like not partner, whatever, associate. Like, he moves up the ladder, makes more money. So he buys his first house. I'm broke again. Then he does even better, gets another raise, is making more money, has kids, so has to get a bigger house. I'm broke again. Another raise, doing even better. We should get a bigger house. We should get a nicer house. I'm broke again. And it was happening over and over again. No matter how much money he made, the lifestyle kept up with that level of spending. And that lifestyle kept him feeling broke over and over again. And that feeling of broke, I think in this episode, was really coming from the fact that if he didn't keep showing up to work and pulling in that high level of income, the whole lifestyle was going to go away.
Yeah. And let's talk about that, right? The myths behind achieving wealth. Everybody, no matter how much money they're making, that goalpost that we all look to as, if I could just get there, I won't have to worry anymore. That goalpost never stays stationary. As you make more and as your lifestyle grows with your income, that goalpost just continues to roll further out. It really puts a hole in the belief that having a high income automatically means that you're wealthy. It's that increased lifestyle, and it's so easy for those expenses to keep creeping up. As soon as you start making more, all of a sudden, you're broke.
I think you're absolutely right. I'll talk about myself, right? If 20-year-old me, 25-year-old me, 20 years ago me starting in this business, you would have told me that I'd be where I am right now, I would have assumed that I had absolutely no financial stress in my life whatsoever. Because at that point in my life, I couldn't even imagine what I would do with the level of income that I make now. I'll give you an example. When I first got out of college, I went to school to be a CPA. I think you and I have talked about that, probably not on this podcast before, but I went to school to be a CPA. And as I went on interviews, I realized, oh, I don't want to be a CPA. So I didn't take any of those jobs, but I had already been the general manager of this movie theater. And man, I think I was maybe at that time as the general manager of a theater, probably capping out at $45,000 a year, 22, 23 years old. And I felt like I had all the money in the world. Like I could not spend all of the money I was making. My situation was crazy different. I lived in a house with somewhere between 6 to 10 other guys. So rent was nothing. Electricity was nothing. My monthly necessary expenses, probably less than $1,000 a month. At that age, I just didn't even know what I could spend money on. Had enough money to hang out with my buddies at night, get some drinks, eat what we wanted. It's not like we were going out to, I didn't even know what an expensive restaurant was. To me, going to Chili's or Red Lobster was really living it up. At that time, Red Lobster was the nicest restaurant I knew. There was no way I could spend it all, right? But then life changes. I think we take things on before the income actually comes with the anticipation of knowing or thinking that money's going to come. We're just so used to being in a getting by situation that when we get more income, we're okay taking on more because it's, oh, I'm already used to just getting by. So I'll get that nicer car. I'll get that nicer house. Whatever it is.
I think there's a natural, almost like a pull of gravity to it. Because when you're getting by, we all have this tendency to think about the things we would get when we finally have that bump in income. I'd imagine everybody has a list in their head of, I'm going to get that new car I've been wanting. I'm going to get a nicer apartment. I'm going to finally buy a house. So by the time that income bump happens, the money's already spoken for. And it's easy to let that happen without really thinking about what other options you could have for the money.
I think the point you're getting to is like, we're thinking about what we could buy, what we could have nicer. And I think we're associating those nicer things with wealth.
Mm-hmm.
And those things are not wealth, right? Just because you drive a nicer car or a more expensive car, that doesn't necessarily make you wealthy. There are a lot of people who live in a $300,000 or $400,000 home that drive a $75,000 or $100,000 car, right? Which is nuts. Why would you buy a car that costs a quarter of what your house cost you? And if those of you who are out there did that and you're offended by what I'm saying right now, I was going to say I'm sorry, but I'm not. It's a bad move. A car is a depreciating asset. It feels good. But I think in that mindset of not really knowing what wealth is, that's what we associate wealth to be, because we see people who we think are wealthy with those things. So we assume if I can get those things, maybe that's when I feel wealthy. But man, those are the things that trap you, right? If I don't bring in this level of income, this whole thing falls apart. How are you going to keep those things?
Yeah, I think it's the perception of wealth, right? We look at people who look like they're doing well. They've got a fancy car, fancy clothes, all the newest stuff. And we think that's what you do when you get there, right? That old saying, keeping up with the Joneses, is still just as true today. It's this perception we care so much about. How can I demonstrate my wealth, whether it's to yourself or to other people? How can I justify and prove that I am now wealthy, or that I have reached a level of wealth where I can have these things?
Yeah, I think you're right. It's thinking that those things are going to make us actually feel wealthy, or if I earn this level of income, I'm going to feel wealthy. But the reality is, it's what do you do with that income that creates wealth? We talk to people who are making high six figures, even seven figures, who still feel broke because their lifestyle eats away at every bit of that money. Going back to my situation when I was just out of college and living with a bunch of other guys and not really making that much, I think about it now, not on paper, right? Not like assets owned, income coming in the door, but like feeling. I would argue that I was wealthier at that point in my life than I am today because I could do whatever I wanted. Not whatever I wanted, because I didn't even know what else I could do. But what the things I could think of and the things I wanted to do at that time, it felt like there was no limit, right? Everything was open to me. I had no stresses about money. That at that time was wealth, right? I didn't feel stuck in any way. I had nothing to my name. I wasn't really saving anything on purpose. It was just I had money left over, but I definitely had no stress. There was nothing on me that was, this has to happen or else everything falls apart. There was nothing to fall apart. No one was depending on me. As long as I could pay the like $100 in rent for the month and maybe $25 on my part of the electricity, everything was fine. Man, maybe my bills were less than 500 a month.
So they're crazy.
It's crazy, right? So all you got to do is live with 10 other people and life will be great.
Stay single, live with 10 other people, go to Red Lobster.
That's right. Hey, man, Red Lobster was for special occasions.
Yeah, I think you hit a good point earlier, right? The freedom, because I think going back to the show that you brought up at the beginning, right? When we're making however much, right, we built up the lifestyle with that increased income, it can feel great at the time, but I would bet that most people who have been in a situation like this, you reach a point where you really start to feel stuck and realize if anything changes with my income, if I lose the job, if I get a pay cut, if I don't get the bonus that I've already basically spent, all of a sudden, everything starts falling apart. And these are people who probably look wealthy on paper, but any change to that income number, any change to the money coming in, it all starts to unravel.
If anybody's listening to this and you feel like we're picking on you, first of all, we don't know you. Second of all, we're only saying this because this is the majority of people we're talking to right now. We could probably have a whole episode about what life is like for Gen X and millennials as compared to baby boomers at this same point in time. But I don't want to get into that right now. Man, we need to get into it, but I don't want to get into it right now. But there's a lot of people making a pretty good income and a lot of people making more money than they ever thought they would that are feeling exactly what we're talking about right now. You know, what would be interesting to talk about? I was talking about myself and living with 6 to 9 other people. I would have been the 10th.
I'm imagining an Animal House style.
So the police actually nicknamed it the Animal House. That's all I'll say about that. That's all I'll say.
You're really laying your cards on the table right now. So I'm getting to know you more in the last 10 minutes.
Let's talk about differences and how wealth changes depending on where you are in life, right? So at that time, I'm like early 20s. Believe it or not, I am only 3 years away from being 50. It happened faster than I thought it would. You're 30.
Don't remind me.
I don't want to hear it, man. I don't want to hear it. What is like for you right now? And I know this may be difficult for you to answer because you meet with a lot of clients that are older than you. Try not to let what we know wealth is for them affect your answer. But like you, your friends, people your age, what if I said, what is wealth to you right now? What would that be?
So I'll answer it in 2 parts because how I would define wealth is probably different than a lot of people my age. I would look at wealth as time, like freedom of time, flexibility of time, financial security, and making more than the money I'm spending, not going paycheck to paycheck and not letting my lifestyle be at the level that my income could afford without being able to save. I think a lot of people my age it is a more immediate gratification situation. I think there are a lot more people that, because of the internet, because of how readily available financial information, personal finance lessons and information is, there's a lot more people that are in that same boat, and they look at wealth as hitting that point where you have financial independence to do the things you want without worrying. But I think a lot of people, there is a much more short-term, like, wealth is having that nice car. It's living in the nicest house or the nicest apartment that can possibly manage to afford, and living that lifestyle at the level of their income.
Why do you think your view of wealth is different from other people your age? Is it just because the business we're in and things from a different perspective?
Yeah, I would say like, how I view wealth, or what I would define as wealth, has definitely changed over the period of time that I've been doing this. I grew up, fortunately, with parents who were very financially careful with their money, making sure that they're saving, making sure they're doing all the right things. But I was much more of that. If I want something today, why shouldn't I be able to just go get it? If I have the money for it, why shouldn't I just get the things that I want?
Do you think that is the idea of what wealth is to the majority of people your age? Or what do you think the idea of wealth to people your age? What do you think that their idea of wealth is? And name specific people.
Just call them out.
Of course, but really people you talk to in behaviors or attitudes or how people actually spend their money. What would you say that the majority of people your age consider wealth?
Honestly, I would say that most, now that I'm thinking about it, I think I'm going to change my answer from earlier. I would say that, especially based on the people that I know, I think most people my age look at wealth as that financial independence, like trying to reach the point where they have enough saved, they've done the right things long enough, can afford the things that they want without having to be dependent month to month on a job. The financial independence piece is what I would say I see to be super common.
Even among 30-year-olds, you think it is like, how do I get to financial independence as fast as possible? Is that like, how do I get to the point where I don't need this job as fast
Yeah.
as possible? Really?
Yeah, because I think my generation, and especially the younger you go from me down, grew up watching our parents work nonstop. We watched our parents live the dream of work until about to retire. When you retire, you've got all this money and you can do all the things you want. I think a lot of us have seen in practice that what that ended up meaning was a lot more time spent working nonstop and not being able to do many of the things you wanted when you finally retired, because it just kept getting kicked down the road. And so I think a lot of people, it's a trade-off, right? Because I think my generation, on the one hand, they're all about experiences, right? The wealth could also be seen as being able to just go on the trips that I want and get the things that I want today, because I don't want to make that this far off dream that I may or may not eventually get to reach. But at the same time, I think it's also seeing what happened with our parents and understanding I just want to get to the point that I can retire, take a step back, maybe switch into a job that I actually enjoy and I'm not doing it because I have to, or working something part-time, but having the flexibility of what I want to do, as opposed to being stuck in, I have to continue working to afford the things that I'm spending money on day to day, month to month.
Yeah, that's interesting. Myself being 30, like 27 years ago, I don't think that's how we were thinking. We were still thinking climb the socioeconomic ladder the way we saw our parents do better than our parents, make a ton of money. A ton of money is the way you get to do all the things you want to do. Making money was what we saw in terms of a way to do the things we wanted to do. I think a lot of people in my generation got to the point maybe in our mid to late 30s, early 40s, where we were making all that money or more money than we thought we would. We got to that point where we were making more money than we thought we would and still felt trapped, still didn't feel happy, right? So I think maybe you guys are seeing some of that and trying to get that quicker. But what I will say, and I think you guys might still experience it, is that what wealth is to you will probably still change over time, and especially change in midlife, because there's a lot of things that haven't come into your life yet. Like what I was saying, when I was in my late 20s, wealth was having enough money to do all the things that I wanted to do. And then when I had kids and a mortgage, it was all these responsibilities, all these other people depending on me. Then wealth became, how do I make sure that they're okay? How do I make sure that they're always going to be fine. And a lot of that was tied to work. How do I make enough income that they're always going to be fine? The problem is when it's all dependent on the income coming in and not even thinking about retirement, because I know you were talking about getting to retirement as fast as possible and this level of independence. That all changes when you've got all these other responsibilities. Suddenly you realize I could have gotten there based on what I spent as a 29, 30-year-old, but now with these things and people depending on me, my tent that covers things has to be much bigger. And I think now when I think of wealth, it's, I think a really underrated thing, not staying up at night thinking about money, right? Not worrying about money. And it's not like I have so much money that I don't have to worry, but it's being in a spot where you don't feel like this whole thing falls apart if I don't bring in this level of income. At 45 or 50, wealth might mean, you know what? My mom, my dad, they're sick. I've got to take a month off to take care of them. And knowing that you can do that without everything falling apart, or hitting 40, 45, 50 and going, man, I've been doing this job a long time chasing the money, but it doesn't really satisfy me. And then actually being able to pivot in your career to find something that you really would enjoy doing without completely blowing up your finances.
Yeah, I think it's very easy when you fall into that cycle of, okay, I'm making more and my lifestyle moves up with it. It's easy to just stay in that cycle and becomes more difficult to step out of it. I would bet anything that somebody making 500, 700,000 a year, living paycheck to paycheck is dealing with a lot more stress, anxiety, unknowns, and feeling more trapped than somebody making 150,000 a year. They know, hey, I can take a month off. I can go see my family. Me and the wife can take a week off and take the kids on a trip. And it's not having to rebalance the entire budget for that single experience.
And that's a level of freedom that's really hard to describe, right? I think that lack of stress about money. Let's talk about some things that let you know if you're on track to building the right kind of wealth. If your income stopped for 3 months, what would happen to your financial situation? Even people that make fantastic money live month to month and are maybe a month, 2 months, 3 months away from everything falling apart. Do you have enough set aside, or would you be okay if your income just did not come in for 3 months? What if a $10,000 emergency happened? Could you handle that without hitting the panic button? Do you know where you could get that from? And for a lot of people I know, you'd think I've been saving money in my 401k. I'd get it from there. But what you end up doing is you end up creating another panic down the road because maybe you're going to shortchange your future retirement, your future freedom. I'd say another thing is, do your finances actually help you live your values, or does it just fund the habits that you have?
Yeah, that last one sounds harsh, but it's probably true for a lot of people. Are you living a life that aligns with the core values that you hold, the core desires that you have, or are you really just funding all of these increased expenses? Are you just buying the nice things because you want to feel wealthy?
Yeah. So I think too, you find out what your values really are when you're faced with either sudden wealth or lack of wealth. I think no matter what, it challenges what is important to you. Let's say you say family is the most important thing to you, but your boss is asking you to work every weekend and work nights on some project. And it means you get to keep your job, or you're being offered all this overtime and it means you get to make more money, and you choose to work all of that extra time, or you feel like you have to work all that extra time. When you don't have enough money, you have to compromise your values because you have to fund all of the other things, right? So family's most important, but I've got all these other things that I'm also juggling, and it all goes away if I don't bring in this money. So you compromise on your values. If you suddenly have an influx of income, you have a choice to make at that time, you know, whether it's an influx of income or whether it's an influx of money or whatever it is, right? Lump sum of money. You then say, okay, let's find out what your values really are. Because if your lifestyle just goes back up, then are those things that you said were your values, right? Family or whatever else it could be, are they really your values? Money or extra money or real wealth should help you live out what your real values are. Your values could be just having an awesome time. And if that's your values, fantastic. Wealth will help you do it. As you get wealthier or accumulate more money or income, keep in mind what your values actually are and use that money to help you live those things out.
Yeah, and I think you hit on a core kind of split in the road that a lot of people, most people probably face in their life, right? Especially if you have a family, if you're making enough just to make ends meet or just enough to where you can afford the things that you want at that time, it can be easy to, or a lot of times you don't really have much choice to have to compromise on some of those things, right? I have to work the extra hours. I have to be willing to do these things to make enough money to fulfill what we need and what we have right now. But when you get that influx, when you finally get that step up in income, I think because we're already in that, I'm just focused on this and making more and fulfilling the lifestyle, you just roll right into fulfilling a larger lifestyle. And that's
Yeah.
the pivot point where I think a lot of people have to really sit down and really define for you and for your family what is enough, right? What is enough for us, not to scrape by necessarily, right? If you're making more money, you don't want to just sit there and say, all right, we're only living off the basis. You really want to make sure you are putting a picture to what is enough, right? What is going to have us satisfied, but allow us to maintain those values that we
Yeah.
may have had to shift in the past.
Yeah. So I think there's 4 things that take you from having more to making the wealth meaningful and truly being wealthy. Number 1, like you just said, is figuring out what is enough. A lot of people think, what do you need to get by? And that's not what we mean by enough. What's enough that you get to do the things you enjoy doing and you're not worried about money? Because if you can establish what that baseline is, then you can work on everything else from there, right? Whether it's taking another job that makes more money, then you can decide what drawbacks come with that job. How much more time am I going to spend away from home? Or maybe an investment opportunity that's very high risk, but the payoff would be fantastic. If you know what enough is and you don't need to take that risk, maybe you look at that risk and that potential payoff much differently because you know you don't need it. Or maybe you know that even if you take that risk and it doesn't work out, you're still going to have enough. I can take that risk. I know what enough is for me and I'm happy with that. So I could actually take this risk, potentially be a financial boon for my family. But if it doesn't work out, we're okay. So the second thing is to build some margin or some cushion into your situation, right? We do spend this on a monthly basis, but these are the things that I could cut out and get to this point where the things that are important to us, we're still able to maintain. Or I've put enough away, not necessarily for the future or for my retirement or my kids' school, but enough away that if I wasn't working for 3 months or some sort of big emergency happened, I could access that. I could access that money I put away without compromising the integrity of my financial plan that's going to send my kids to school and allow us to retire one day. And then I'd say third, think about what really is most important to you, right? What are your values? What are the things that you really want your financial decisions to reflect of you? What do you want your financial decisions to say about you? And I think that's more important than people realize because your kids learn money from you. You're the person they see every day. And whether you realize it or not, they absorb how you treat money and what your relationship with money is. So that value system and what you value, not just money, but what you value in your everyday life, what you spend your time on, what is most important to you, your kids know. And they are learning from you. So figure out what those values are and align your money with those things. And I think the fourth thing is to create flexibility in choices. We talk about it with our clients all the time that one of our biggest objectives is to put them in the position of choice, right? You want to put yourself in a position where you don't have to work all that extra time that your boss is asking you to, or all that overtime or whatever it is, right? You don't have to work longer than you want to. You don't have to, and I don't know, Have to a lot of things. I think that's the thing. Get yourself in a point where you don't have to. And when you put yourself in the position of choice, you get to decide what comes next. I think that's what wealth is, right? Wealth is having enough, right? Having enough and knowing that is enough for you and what's important to you, right? It's not, do I have a nicer car than my neighbor? Do I have a bigger house than the guy down the street? That's not what it is, because that's never going to be enough. If you constantly compare yourself to what other people have, if wealth to you is all of these material things, you are never going to have enough, because there's always going to be a more expensive car. There's always going to be a bigger house. There's always going to be a nicer vacation. Even if you own a private jet, there's always going to be a nicer, bigger jet. There's always going to be someone with more money than you. If you are measuring your wealth by that, even if you're measuring wealth by the amount of money you have, you will never feel wealthy, because you will always know someone else has something better or something more than you do. So you have to decide what is enough that gives me that feeling of freedom, lets me go to bed without worrying about money. That's wealth. Getting to that point where you do not worry. I don't care if you bring in $10 a week. If you bring in $10 a week and somehow you don't have to worry about money and you're happy and you don't stress, you're wealthy.
Yeah. I think it's really important, right? For people when they sit down and try to think about what is enough. We're human beings, we're emotional, right? It can be easy to mix or have the wires crossed on what feels like enough. It isn't just I would say it's not something that you want to spend 2 minutes and go, okay, yeah, that's all I need. I know what enough is. Really try and sit there and think on the values, like we talked about. Think about what is enough for me to be happy, satisfied, comfortable.
Yeah. And again, I'm not railing against having nice things or fantastic experiences. I like nice things. I like awesome experiences. I like doing cool stuff. So if that's what makes you happy and that's where your value system is, awesome. But know what it is. Know what that value system is, and know what you need to be able to do all those things you want to do. That's wealth. Wealth is not, I'm just accumulating stuff and I've got to bring in this income. Otherwise, all that stuff goes away. Wealth is, even if it's stuff, it is, dude, I wake up and I'm not worried. That stuff is still going to be there. Doesn't matter what's going to happen. The things that are important to me, if you're not worried about it just blowing up and going away, that's it. And I'm not talking about blowing up your life, right? It's small shifts in your thinking that give you control. Peace of mind, being able to lay your head down on the pillow and fall asleep without worrying about money, is absolutely an underrated financial goal.
Yeah.
All right. So if you're listening to this and you're in that phase of life, you've checked the boxes, you've built the income, but you don't feel at peace, then maybe it's time for you to redefine what success looks like.
Yeah. At the end of the day, wealth is about having enough and knowing what you want to do with it.
Exactly. It's about freedom and the ability to live a life that feels like it's yours.
Yeah. And if this resonated with you, what we talked about really hit home, send it to a friend, send it to somebody who you think it might help ring the bell for them in terms of helping them rethink what wealth might be. Or if you got somebody who just bought that brand new jet ski, but they're making it month to month on rent, send it to them. Maybe it'll help.
We've all got that friend. Appreciate you listening. Don't forget to hit and subscribe. It would really mean a lot to us. We'll see you next time.